The two of you are sitting in the studio and you've just said to me, you won't believe it, we've both got daughters of 2 years old. What are you doing, Jason, for that daughter's education?
Well, Jeremy, I think the first and starting point for me is understanding what I have available to me now to actually save. I mean, it's pointless starting a financial savings plan for something where you actually can't afford to contribute to it. So it's about doing a proper budget, understanding my current position. So where do I sit right now? Then I start the process of unpacking the sort of expenses that I would expect to have during the course of for argument's sakes, my daughter's lifetime. So that would include, you know, preschool, schooling, primary school, senior school, and then university, and perhaps some expenses, as we know, that come later. Included in that may be things like cars, etc. Mm-hmm. Once I sort of given myself a bit of a picture of what that looks like, I put that into some sort of a budget, and that should actually give me a fairly good estimate in today's value how much I'm going to need over the course of the next 20-25 years. Then I need to take out my calculator, do some very, very interesting sums, adding things like inflation into account, working out what sort of growth rates I can expect on assets if I'm investing them relative to that inflation mark. So I'm talking about a real return sort of growth rate.
Right.
And once I've done that, that'll give me a fairly good idea as to what sort of money I need to have during the course of the lifetime of my daughter, or her life, to actually make sure she can do the things that she wants to do.
And at that stage, that's where you probably burst into tears.
Absolutely. And that's not to say that that plan is going to resolve the issue, because I think that's just the starting point. It's the starting point of the conversation. So what I then need to do is go back to my original budget, realize how much I can start contributing now, understand that life goes up and down, and we hopefully will be in a better position. We may be in a worse position. The point is that I can't control. What I can control is the things I can do today, and I need to start putting a savings plan together in order to at least put me on track to achieving that goal. So is that a final answer? No, it's not. It needs to be reviewed every single day.
Lloyd?
Yeah, I mean, I'm listening to Jason and I'm thinking that definitely there is a 2-year-old at home. And having gone through all the emotions and looking at the costs that are there, I must say I'm at the stage where I'm looking at the future and saying, you know, there's a lot that one still needs to do. But yes, definitely being in the industry, there's a lot of stuff that one has put in place already. And I'm not going to go back to what Jason has mentioned, but some of the things that are also critical, especially for the younger people who have newly born children who are like a year or 2 years old, their biggest asset is the fact that they can still generate an income. Mm-hmm. And because of that, they can still grow in their careers, in their businesses, and they can still make a lot more, you know, and so forth. So one of their biggest challenges is that what happens if they happen to lose that asset? Either through accident, they become disabled, or they actually die. So the point of departure would be maybe making sure that you have sufficient risk cover that would ensure that should anything happen to you now, and you cannot make the money that you are aspiring to make, then your offsprings are well taken care of. Then step number 2 is then now going back to the investment bit and saying, all right, now that I've made sure that in case something happens to me now, these people are taken care of, then I look at my budget. The second thing is actually making sure that you cut down on debt.
I was going to raise that, because I mean, another way around this, excuse me, especially if you're still young, is you can also look at it from a sort of reverse angle and say, well, I'm not going to save now. I'm going to get rid of debt now. So I'm going to take my earnings and pay off probably my biggest asset, my home.
Exactly.
I'm going to pay that off so that come 8 years' time, the money I will be paying into the home loan, I can start pushing into some sort of fund for my child, because there, the timeline on the risk is a lot shorter than your 18 years. It may now only be 10. So you could be able to judge it. Am I thinking right here? You're both just looking at me,
Yeah.
and I'm just thinking that you're
I
sitting here thinking the Oak's talking such rubbish, and everyone's laughing at him right now, so we'll just let him carry on.
Not at all.
No, the logic is not wrong. The logic is not wrong. However, there is also a benefit in starting to save and putting the money away early, because there's the effect of compounding. And that you cannot underestimate. You know, a person who starts saving 20 years before the time is much better off than a person who starts 15 years before the time. In fact, you know, you can play with the numbers. You know, if you want to get out, let's say 5 million rand after 20 years, and you start contributing 20 years from now, you probably will contribute about 6,000 rand or so. But a person who starts 5 years later would probably have to contribute more than 12,000 rand. So there is a cost as well of delaying. That is why there's a lot of thinking that needs to go behind it. There's a lot of science behind it, and there's a lot of professional financial advice that you need to actually make the right call at the right time, because timing also can be a very crucial factor in this. I don't know what you
There's a lot of head nodding going on here.
Yeah, I think Lloyd's made some very, very good points. I think you need to be very careful that that you don't start too late, because very often by starting later, the gap that you need to cover is just too great to actually make up that difference. I think probably one of the good things, if you're wanting to do something that's more of a combination, would be to say, yes, settle some of your debt, but the difference between what you're settling and what you're saving then goes into an education fund or goes into some sort of investment that's going to achieve the objective. So at least you're starting the process and allowing that compounding effect to take place. But I think, Jeremy, that the point here is that there's not a single answer for every single person. I think the point here is that in order to make an educated decision for yourself, you actually need to sit down with a professional. You need to unpack your own situation, your own life, and you need to tailor something that's going to actually suit your own individual needs. Because, I mean, we can discuss this until the cows come home.
Yeah.
The fact is that there are so many different nuances to cover that it becomes very, very, very difficult. So I think the starting point is go and see a professional that can help you put you on your right track.
I was half hoping that you would both come in here and I'd say, how do you cater for your child's education? And you go, oh, no, it's easy. You do this and that and that, and everything's fine. But no, it didn't work that way. No. So, thanks, guys. You're really helping me here. But you are in this position right now, I believe.
Yeah, so, I mean, we had a discussion not so long ago, my wife and I, around the education process. And yes, you look at the numbers and they are significantly scary. You know, you start planning, particularly if you're having a look at private educations and university educations. And by the way, not just those big lump sums that we're talking about, it's the bits in between that actually cost a hang of a lot more than you think.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you go through that process, it's a dreadfully frightening thing to look at. So how do you deal with that, you know, besides, you know, making a decision not to have children? Well, you've got to go about it very carefully. You've got to think about it very carefully. You've got to understand your financial circumstances very clearly as they stand now, and you've got to have a view of what it's going to look like down the line. I don't think you can go out in today's world, just have kids and expect that everything will just be fine and you'll cope with it as and when it comes up.
You shouldn't need to write an exam before you're allowed to have children, to be honest, on a lot of things.
I agree.
Yeah. Just out of interest, because you're both young people looking at starting, you've got a child?
Yes, I have a
Okay.
2-year-old.
Okay. If I may ask, fairly personally, how are you invested? What are you invested in?
Well, I must say that at this point in time, I have invested, some of my assets are sitting in a balanced portfolio locally, and a very small percentage of my assets are actually invested in equities offshore. However, the next move now, which is important for me, is to actually, you know, invest a little bit more into equities locally, so that I can actually gain more out of the long-term returns through the markets.
And property?
Property, definitely. Might have forgotten that. Yeah, I have invested hugely in property as well, too, at the stage.
Jason?
Diversification. That's the key to financial success. I think diversification and time. You need to have time on your sides. on your side in order to really get the upsides and get through the downsides. I think if any investor should know that, it's that. If anything they should know that. And diversification. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Make sure that you've got a bit of everything, and certainly that you are tracking it on a regular basis. And that's not every single day, but certainly at least on an annual basis, and making sure that the things that you are doing are putting you on track to actually achieving the objectives that you're trying to achieve, and making sure that you can make the adjustments and not wait until 18 years later when the surprise gets given to you, and now you're sort of left stumbling. So for me, it's very much about diversification, time, and making sure I'm keeping an ongoing plan going.
Thank you very much, both of you, for your input here this evening. It's been great. It hasn't helped at all. It's given me a lot more to think about. Well, I don't have to think about it anymore now because I'm in the last phase. But I think for a lot of people out there who are parents and have young children, it is maybe a good time to sit down with a financial advisor and just to have a look at your situation and see what you need to be doing for the future.